Francis, and our area of practice is retirement. And I am I was trained as a scientist, as a physicist and mathematician and engineer, aerospace engineer. My definition of consciousness would be that, whatever that is, which is hearing these words right now. Whatever that is, without making any hypothesis as to what that is. I don't have really a definition for mind, and mind would be our human experience, the facts of our human experience, except for consciousness. That would be my definition of it. In other words, perceptions, sensations, thoughts that arise, of course, in consciousness. Non-duality, the definition of non-duality would be there is only one reality. There is one single reality. We all have the knowledge that we are conscious and that consciousness is real. In this moment, as I speak, these words are being heard and these images are being seen. And that which sees them, that which hears the words, is consciousness, whatever that is. That is clear, that is beyond the shadow of a doubt. That which is perceived is mind stuff. We never perceive the world out there. We only perceive our perceptions of it. Two different observers observing the world from two different positions, in fact, get two different images. Therefore, each has his world being observed. So the world is only a concept which is inferred from perceptions. Perceptions are mind stuff. Now, we have no doubt that our experience is real, and the centrality of our experience, that which we call I, is obviously the consciousness element of it, since everything else comes and goes. That which is real must always be there with our experience. Therefore, the real element to it is the consciousness. Now, if the consciousness is the reality of our experience, and if there is only one reality, the reality of our experience and the reality of the world, of the universe, and the reality of all minds must be the same. So that's the fundamental understanding of non-duality. How do we understand what the I is? Well, I was referring to the centrality of our experience. That's that which call I. Therefore, the true I must be the consciousness that perceives. Now, we often have an image, an idea, or a sensation of what we believe the I to be. We believe me as a person to be my body, my size, the color of my eyes, my personal history, my date of birth, the amount of my bank account, my children, my family, etc. All of that is obviously not me, but precisely that which I am not. That to which everything appears is the true me, the true I. there is only one thing. How can we understand the apparent complexity or diversity with which this one thing manifests? That's a good question. But as we ask ourselves these questions, we already posit the reality of the diversity. You see, so we have already somehow make our choice that there is diversity and that diversity is real. In fact, in our experience, there is no diversity at all. If you think about it, everything we perceive, there is no mind. The mind is an inference, but not an experience. Everything we perceive is perceptions, mentations, thoughts, bodily sensations, so-called external sense perceptions. That's all there is to our experience. So these perceptions, they appear in consciousness, they exist in consciousness, they disappear in consciousness. When a thought leaves, it doesn't go anything else in a storage room to be stored. It ceases to exist, which implies that the real substance the thought was made of is consciousness itself. And therefore, consciousness is a substance not only of our thoughts, but of all the perceptions, therefore of what we usually understand as mind. So since all the perceptions are only consciousness, there is no diversity in fact. Well, the question that arises is that we seem to be the doer, the decider of our actions. But this question about free will can be approached from two different angles. From the inside out and from the outside in, if you will. Let's take first the approach from the inside out. Do we choose our thoughts? We usually believe we choose our thoughts. But in fact, it is not the case. Such is not the case, because if it were true that we choose our thoughts, we could decide to have only happy thoughts or to have no thoughts at all. You know, we don't go to the supermarket of thoughts and say, I want this one, and then I want a dozen of that one, and I want that one here. That's not the way it happens. The thoughts come to us, pre-chosen, just like the weather, like the clouds in the sky. Therefore, since our decisions appear as thoughts, we don't choose our decisions either. If we don't choose our decisions, we don't choose our actions, because our actions are either the result of an intellectual decision, in which case we have not chosen the thought, or they are just a purely reflex action of the body, which is not different from our digestion or from our heartbeat, and we don't choose those. They just happen. They are chosen by nature. So that's one way to look at it. So there is no really personal entity that can decide the action, so there is no doer. If we look at it from the outside in, and if we make an assumption which is very, very, very current in our culture, that the brain is in fact that the factory that creates the thoughts and that creates the decisions. Therefore, from that vantage point, and if we consider the brain being a structure of cells, each cell being a structure of molecules, each molecule being a structure of atoms, each atom being a structure of particles, the brain cannot be, and even the human body, cannot be considered from that vantage point as being a physical isolated system. In modern physics teaches us that since all the particles were originated from the Big Bang, they interacted at that point, at that moment of the Big Bang, and therefore they should be, the entire universe should be considered as one single system from that vantage point. Everything is deeply, at a very deep level, interrelated in the system, in the universe. Therefore, the body cannot be considered as an isolated system that could generate the thoughts. So even from this materialist vantage point, if you will, a thought that arises in the brain, making this assumption, has to be considered to be a cosmic event and not a personal event. Therefore, the arising of a thought in the human brain is not different from the appearance of a cloud that crosses the sky from that vantage point. So from that vantage point, there is no free will, in fact. There is no personal doer. There is no person that can choose the thoughts or the decisions. The question that arises is the interrelationship between science and non-duality, which is the object of this conference, and the link that there might be between the wisdom of the East or the wisdom of the perennial philosophy on the one hand, and the findings, the discoveries of 20th century physics. Although I've been trained as a mathematician and a physicist, I'm not competent to speak for physics. And all I can speak of is from my own experience as a human being and as consciousness. One day, Jeffrey Chu, Professor Chu, who was then the Dean of Physical Sciences at UC Berkeley, asked me the question, what is the relationship between that which you're talking about and quantum physics? He knew I was trained as a physicist, and in my answer, I said, I love science too much to give a different answer than none whatsoever. None whatsoever, because the scope of science is very different from the scope of philosophy. Science is interested in the world of phenomena. Science cannot answer the question, what is this? Or even, why do we have that? That which science, the question that science knows how to answer and answers beautifully is how. How? If I have a weight in my hand and if I release it, what is going to happen? How is the universe going to evolve as a result? And science does a beautiful job in doing that. But if science asks the question, what is gravity? And then gravity is a force that is exerted by two masses at a certain distance, and which is inversely proportional to the square of the distance between the center of masses of these two masses, etc. But then this answer is not satisfactory, because then we'll ask, why then is there this law? Why is that inversely proportional, this force, to the square of the distance and not to simply the distance itself? Why? You see, and just making a stupid question. Or why is the value of the universal gravity constant, why does it have exactly this value and not another one? Why does it have this strange value? Why does the Planck constant have this ridiculous value, or the speed of light, for that matter? You see, science will never answer. If Einstein had been asked this question, I think that Einstein would have answered, because God wanted it so. And since God doesn't play dice, you see, that's what happens. Nothing happens by chance. God wants it that way, it happens that way. So the connection between physics and science on the one hand, and non-duality, this experience of reality within, which is transcendental, in fact, and which leaves us in our happiness, in our presence, in our joy, in our love, in our solitude, if you will, they don't really interfere with one another. They are not interdependent. However, they can somehow help each other. And they can help each other in the following way. Modern physics is a very powerful tool that enables us to liberate ourselves from very simplistic view we have about the universe and ourselves. When we look at the microscopic scale, the strange properties exhibited by elementary particles, I mean, we enter a different universe. They seem to know things, these particles. They seem to know whether a corp is standing there watching for their flying by in a two-slit experiment. In the case of electrons, they have very, very weird behavior. So then that enables us to liberate ourselves from this belief in an atomistic, solid, compact universe of matter. Similarly, also the theory of relativity, of the notion of absolute time, of the simultaneity, absolute simultaneity of two events, for instance, of the difference between matter and energy. So all of that liberates us from and makes us more open to the possibility that this very simple consciousness hearing these words is in fact the ultimate stuff the universe is made of. But science can never reach this conclusion. And on the other hand, the contribution of non-duality to physics would be a heuristic one, in that sense that analogies can be a source of inspiration for researchers, for scientists in various domains. I'm certain that in the 21st century there will be a very fruitful exploration by multidisciplinary teams, neuroscientists, quantum physicists, perhaps psychologists, into the nature of mind, for instance. And that some creativity can be derived from the understanding at a deeper level of the oneness of consciousness. Can we ever know what we are? Or is this quest doomed to failure? And the answer to this question is a two-pronged one. With the mind, at the phenomenal level, we cannot know who we are. And for a very simple reason, is that we are not a phenomenon. We are not an object. We are the presence in which all objects appear. And as such, we know already that we are consciousness. So we know already what we are. The problem is that we don't know all that which we are. And the reason why we don't know all of that which we are is because we believe to be something else than that which we are. And that which we believe to be is a body, or at most a mind, limited. And it is precisely this belief that we have inherited, possibly from our culture, from our parents, schools, etc., possibly from our genes, but that we have inherited. It is this belief that we are a body-mind, a limited entity, that prevents us from being knowingly that which we truly are. And in order for that which we truly are to reveal itself, we need to be open to it. We need to be open to this possibility. For it won't reveal itself unless we want it to reveal itself. As long as we want it to be something else than what it is, our desire for it to be limited, to be something, to be an object, prevents it from limiting itself. There is a beautiful, in one of Meister Eckhart's sermons, he says something like, the human mind is like a room, and as long as there is stuff in it or people in it, God doesn't enter and remains. But he never goes far away. He remains at the door, outside. As soon as the room is empty, God enters. The stuff in the room that prevents God from entering is the beliefs about what we are. So the only prerequisite for being knowingly what we are is to liberate ourselves from all the beliefs about what we are. And that is accomplished using a tool, if you will, an engine, and using a fuel to propel this engine. The fuel is a desire for it. Without this fuel, the engine is leading nowhere, cannot work. The engine for it is the investigation. To investigate using all means at our disposal the truth about consciousness, based upon our experience, because nobody else can tell us what we are. Nobody else knows what we are. Only we can answer this question by using all means at our disposal, all realms of experience that are open to us, to answer a simple question based upon the evidence available to me. Can I make the call that consciousness is limited and personal? That's all. If we do this investigation, we will find out there is no evidence that substantiates this belief, and that will leave us in this state of true openness that makes us an empty room. And when the room is empty, it becomes holy, it becomes a temple, and God enters. And there is a revelation. what is the goal of the dreamer as she dreams her dream, other than somehow her own enjoyment? That would be one answer. The other answer is there is no evolution. It's all consciousness. In order for there to be evolution, there needs to be time. And there is to be evolution from A to B. There is the need for something separate that can evolve independently. But when there is only one reality, the evolution can only be a display, an appearance, but not even a transformation. Can we say that the TV screen evolves as the movie unfolds? No. In the movie, 20 years elapse, but in the TV room, only 1.5 hours. So we are talking about two different universes, one which is real, the other one which is, by reference to the real, less real, therefore an illusion. I'm not saying that this universe here is qualitatively the same thing as a night dream. There are apparent differences, but after all, not two night dreams are alike. But when we refer this universe of the waking state to consciousness or presence, then it becomes an illusion. It becomes simply a wave on the surface of the ocean of being, of presence. Now, the question about evolution can be answered also from a different standpoint. I'm not at all a biologist, so I'm not going to speak to Darwinism and this kind of thing. But from a spiritual perspective, I would say that nothing happens by chance. That the evolution of the universe is not the result of randomness and necessity, as a famous Nobel Prize used to put it. It is rather every, let's put it that way, every event is full of meaning for all parties involved. And we'll discover later on that everything that happened to us, to each of us, was the only purpose of it was to take us to the source of our being. And it was at every moment exactly what was needed at that moment to take us one step further. And therefore, as Robert Adams used to put it, that all is well and unfolding as it should. I think that's the highest concept or answer that could be that I would give to the question, why is there evolution or apparent evolution? If everything is unfolding as it should, is there any freedom in this evolution? The answer is yes, because I would make a distinction between predetermination or predestination on the one hand, and And on the other hand, I don't know how to call that, pre-designed from a higher source. The difference is as follows. In the case of, or preordained, preordination, preordained. In the case of predetermination, the prefix pre means before in time. Before in time. Everything is decided and there is a plan, and everything is going from now on, the moment we decide let's go, everything is going to follow according to plan. Every single minute detail has been decided for the rest of eternity. Okay, that's one vision, predestination or predetermination. Everything is determined, there is no freedom. Preordained means something else. That's my definition of it, of course, but for the sake of communication. In this case, pre doesn't mean pre in time, pre in the linearity of time, but pre from the timeless. It means that everything gets decided from a different source. At every moment, the rule of the game can be changed, because after all, since there is only one reality, when God signs a contract, enters a covenant, in fact, he enters this covenant with no other than himself or herself. Therefore, he has or she has no problem changing it at any time, because there is only one, you see. Therefore, God is not bound by the first plan he has made. He can change plans. He can change plans as, or she can change plans as she wishes. So there is this freedom which is there in the intervals between events, in the intervals between appearances, as we go back to the source of presence. Then there is an opportunity for the new, for the creativity. So then the world is changed during this moment. Something new is injected into the world from presence. Everything can change. So it's a very different view. It's a view which doesn't have this pessimistic outlook. You see, people often in the spiritual perspective, they say, okay, there is no doer. I cannot do anything. So why would I investigate or search for the truth? At the same time, I'm desperate. You see? And so they find themselves in a kind of catch-22 situation. Well, it is true that there is no freedom at the personal level. But the personal level is not all we are. In fact, it is that which we are not. As consciousness, as presence, we are freedom itself. So as in us the desire arises to investigate the truth about the I, about what we are, this desire doesn't arise from ignorance. This desire arises from freedom itself. It is freedom seeking itself. It is freedom seeking liberation. Therefore, this desire is effective. It cannot be understood as a personal desire. And there is a freedom there. And I would say to such a truth seeker, you cannot speak from both sides of your mouth. Either you believe that you are a doer, or you know there is not a doer. If you know there is no doer, in this moment there is nothing to do. Just enjoy the moment. However, if you believe to be a doer, then there is something to do, which is to investigate the reality of this doer, if there is such a personal doer. So often the confusion is the result of mixing up the two possibilities, whereas at any given moment in time, you either believe to be a doer, or you know you are not a doer. They are never concomitant. So whichever you choose is going to dictate what is the right attitude in this moment.